I would like to welcome Kevin Renner, Senior VP of eMindful, to the program. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Excited to have you on the program this morning. Before we dig into kind of some of the research and data here on mindfulness, do you mind just giving our audience kind of a background on eMindful?
Oh, sure. eMindful has been providing employers with applied mindfulness programs since 2009, and we deliver those programs in a real interesting and very scalable format. So our programs are actually courses, typically 10 to 12 weeks in length, that are delivered live but in an online webinar-style classroom. So we are able to reach very widely dispersed employee populations with simplicity. And so it is a great way for employers, particularly large employers, that have people around the country or around the world, to give them a consistent, quality-assured mindfulness training experience. But the advantage also is that, by doing it live as opposed to some sort of pre-recorded or on-demand content, people really get the benefit of participating in a class and an ongoing community with others. And so we found through some research we have done with one of our large customers, for example, that we actually had higher levels of engagement and participation in the live online classes than they had in the live on-site classes. So that's basically our business model. And we've worked with well over 100 companies around the world, and with employees in more than 135 countries now.
And, before we get any further, can you kind of talk more concretely about what, people may have some idea of mindfulness being maybe breathing exercises or, yoga-type meditation or whatnot, but can you give us some more concrete examples of what those classes may consist of?
Oh, sure. Well, breathing and following one's breathing is one of the tools to learning mindfulness. There are others. There are formal mindfulness practices that we teach, as well as informal practices that people can use throughout the day. But the specific applications that we have for mindfulness include really the most popular and traditional area, which is stress management and resiliency. So there are 10 and 12-week classes that we offer that meet once a week that address employee stress, resiliency, and burnout. But as well, we have adopted programs that have followed a lot of the scientific literature of the last decade and have applied mindfulness programs in 5 other areas that are really quite interesting. Metabolic syndrome and weight management is also very popular, and mindfulness has been shown to be extremely effective in regulating behavior around eating and food. We have a program in diabetes. We also have an applied program in chronic pain management. We have a program in smoking cessation that has very, very high success rates. In fact, higher success rates than the all of the other approaches, including the Cancer Society. And then we have finally a program in cancer support, applied mindfulness for cancer care. So these are all areas that employers have found to be really, really significant, either costs for them or issues for their employees. There's a wealth of research. Willis Towers Watson, for example, found that stress and obesity are the number 1 and number 2 issues facing employers, and over 3/4 of employers are pointing to those as top risk factors. So we really tailored mindfulness based upon the scientific literature so that we could apply it to these high-cost, high-risk areas facing employers and the people who work for them.
Ron, did you have a question for our guest?
Yeah. Kevin, this is Ron Bachman. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Hi, Ron.
The programs that you're putting together, for those maybe who haven't been using the technology that you're describing, Might they think of it in terms of sort of today's electronic version of lunchtime programs to train employees in various areas?
Sure. I mean, it's you could think of it almost as a virtual lunch and learn, where people can dial in. They can go into a conference room or at their desk, or the classes are offered during work hours as well as after work. And so, I think it's a good metaphor. People can just treat it as a kind of a lunch and learn.
Yeah. The one of the big topics that we hear about, and that is going to be sort of front and center in many ways at our Atlanta conference, is the concept and terminology that's becoming a lot more common these days, well-being. Is eMindful or the mindfulness that you're describing sort of a key part of well-being, or how do you see the connection between what you're doing and maybe the term, and do you use that term well-being?
Yes. And yes, we do use that term, and it's a broader umbrella under which mindfulness plays a major role. And you've seen this evolution in employers where they have really started to recognize that it's not that employee benefits are the endpoint, but that benefits are a means to an endpoint of the overall well-being and health and productivity and emotional stability and health of their employees. So that is really how we see the marketplace developing, and mindfulness does play a major role within that.
So why do you think employees today are in greater need of these services? What is it about the marketplace or the culture or the environment or the change in maybe generational changes in the workforce? What is it that's causing so much stress in the workplace that needs to be addressed with programs like yours?
Yeah, so I'd like to talk about stress and then also obesity. So, stress is just now endemic in the workplace, right? Every decade, the intensity of global competition heightens, the nonstop connectivity to our jobs increases. We are, we're online 24/7 now with mobile devices and our phones. So people struggle to get away from the demands of their work. There are all kinds of surveys that come out, of course, and you guys see them as well as we do. One of the most interesting that I came across a few months ago was that literally in the span of 1 year, the percentage of employees reporting that they were stressed at work jumped from 73% to 83% in the latest survey. And that's a 10% jump in 1 year. Another piece of research, as I was looking through some of the data out there before our interview, was that the employee assistance program ComPsych found that 56% of employees experience high stress levels, right? And that's accompanied by feelings of extreme fatigue, feeling out of control. And so, these are people who get sick more often. There are people who are absent more often. There are people who are distracted at work more often when they're under that kind of stress. And, there was even really, really pioneering research by Aetna a few years ago that was published in a peer-reviewed journal. And they found that the most stressed employees in their workforce had medical claims nearly $2,000 higher than employees in the lowest quintile for stress. So the stress issues are just pervasive.
Now, you talked about obesity as well. What I've always told employers, and what we go over at our conferences and my pre-con that I have on healthcare consumerism, I tell employers that, if you don't have a stress management program in your workplace, I can assure you 100% of the time your employees have their own stress management program. It may be comfort food, it may be smoking, it may be alcohol, it may be drugs, but they're going to do something to relieve their stress. And so the programs like yours step in there and give a positive direction to those stress management programs that employees otherwise maybe go off in the wrong direction. So is that the connection between obesity and the stress programs? Is that people are overeating, they're not paying attention to themselves, they're not getting the right medical care, and I guess not everybody necessarily makes that connection, but it's real there from the data that you're quoting.
Yes, one of the issues associated with overeating is just what you pointed to, is that it's a reactive pattern for many people to the stress that they experience. And, we're all familiar with the term comfort food, right? And, it's an enormous problem. I mean, the medical costs of obesity, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, $147 billion a year. And so one of the things we teach in the we call it Weight Balance for Life program, is really connecting to those inner signals of hunger and fullness and stress and the role that they play in overeating. A third of the population in the U.S. is overweight, and a third of the population in the U.S. is obese. Those are really, really expensive issues for employers.
Right. How does your program take into account, say, the use of personal devices that might give feedback? Do you focus on that, or do you see that part of your future, or do you see that as a growing part in the marketplace that relates to the services that you're providing through your webinars?
Yeah, you can certainly practice mindfulness very, very successfully without any kind of a feedback device. And in fact, that is how most people practice it. You kind of attune to your own feedback. But we have a partnership with the Muse product, which is that brain sensing headband that has become quite popular. And so we've developed a recent business relationship with them. And in fact, we had a very successful kind of market launch with them January and February of this year. So we absolutely do partner with companies such as those folks, and for people who want to use that kind of feedback during their training, it's certainly a viable option.
Another tool to use. Where do you see the market going then in the future with your programs and maybe new ideas and creative thinking in this whole space?
Yeah. That's an interesting question. I think this year is truly an inflection point in the marketplace, and I've been working with eMindful since 2010. Part of the reason I say that is just the upwelling in proposal requests we're getting from the major consulting houses and large employers. Part of it is seeing the presentations at conferences, the interest level at conferences. We said at the beginning of this year as a company that we truly thought that within 5 years, 80% of Fortune 500 companies will have adopted mindfulness programs. And that was our internal judgment just as a management team of the company. And, 6 weeks later, there was an article in Fortune that quotes a Fidelity and National Business Group on Health research program. And that they are forecasting that this year, 22% of major employers are going to offer a mindfulness program to their employees, and that next year that number could actually double.
Wow.
So I don't think our kind of intuitive sense of the marketplace of 80% within 5 years, probably assessment. The market is accelerating so fast you can smell the rubber burning in it. It's just really taking off.
Well, I think if you get more familiar with some of the basic concepts that IHC has been promoting, you'd see that your products and services are a good part of what we call our Generation 3 and part of Generation 4 personalized health, and the whole market's still in Generation 2. So you're clearly on the leading edge, and I think it's very exciting to hear what you're doing and the idea that the marketplace is responding so positively to you. I think we all hope that we can move rapidly into these future ideas and concepts. I think we're about out of time, Kevin. Would you tell people maybe some takeaways and then how they can best get in touch with you or with somebody at eMindful?
Oh, sure. Well, there are a few key takeaways, and I think that those are that the problems that mindfulness can address are pervasive and urgent for employers. The solution is real. It it's interesting. There were literally 20 years ago, there were 2 scientific papers published that year on mindfulness. Last year, there were 902 published. So the science behind this is real. And our research as a company over the last 6 years has validated and seen the same kinds of things that are reported in the scientific journals in terms of stress reduction, metabolic syndrome reduction, productivity improvements. All of that is echoed in our research. And I would say that if anybody would like follow-up information, whether it's white papers on any of our research or further conversation, simply feel free to email me, and they can reach me at Kevin, just Kevin, at eMindful.com. And I'd be happy to respond with any of the resources that we have.
Great. Well, thank you very much for a very informative discussion, Kevin. We look forward to seeing you in Atlanta.
Thanks for having me on the show.